First off, some breaking news. Donald Trump has now declared that Biden's pardons are void. And he's saying this because, well, because Biden signed his documents, or someone else did, using an auto pen, meaning these cannot be officially verified as being signed by the president himself. All of those pardons are no longer being recognized by the Trump administration. And while Trump cannot, for example, order investigations, he is suggesting that the people pardoned should now face investigation. Now look, a few other news stories today. President Trump has also officially invoked the Alien Enemies Act. Over 200 members of Tren de Aragua, the gang, and also MS-13, they have been deported from the U.S. and arrived at their brand new home, a prison in El Salvador. A judge tried blocking Trump from doing this. Trump just ignored the judge. Also, meanwhile, Kari is now senior advisor for the U.S. Agency for Global Media, and she announced some major changes to government media. And also, is Trump pushing to devalue the U.S. dollar using tariffs? Why would he do this? Well, I'll be discussing these topics and more today, so let's get started. Now, first of all, folks, we'll be getting more on the auto pen issue. But look, over 200 gang members from Tren de Aragua and MS-13, they've been deported from the United States. This is probably the first of many. And they've now arrived at their new home, a prison in El Salvador. Now, videos were posted online showing the gang members being taken from the planes, heads held down, heads shaved, sent to the country's Terrorism Confinement Center, which is being paid for now by the U.S. at a very good deal. The deportations of all these individuals follow recent actions from President Donald Trump to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. Donald Trump has now officially declared the United States is under invasion by Tren de Aragua, a gang, and also by Venezuela by extension. Now, a legal battle is starting there as well. A federal judge blocked Trump invoking the act, and then the judge also ordered that the deportation of gang members be stopped. Even said the planes have to turn around and people have to just return all the gang members to America. The president of El Salvador responded to the judge and said, too late. Not even joking. Now, look, first off on the orders. As Donald Trump discussed when he was on the campaign trail, he has now invoked the Alien Enemies Act. He suggested he'd do it. He has now officially done it. This is an 18th century law in place for most of America's history. It was put into action actually shortly after the forming of the United States as a country. And this basically allows the Trump administration to use very broad powers to carry out mass deportations, effectively declaring that we're under attack, under invasion. There's a war going on effectively. And in order to protect the people of the United States, we need to treat the individuals invading us as like an invading army. Now, this is the official order from Donald Trump invoking this. The White House, it says, Tren de Aragua, TDA, is a designated foreign terrorist organization with thousands of members, many of whom have unlawfully infiltrated the United States and are conducting irregular warfare, that's your war, and undertaking hostile actions against the United States. TDA operates in conjunction with the Cartel de los Soles, the Nicolas Maduro regime-sponsored narco-terrorism enterprise based in Venezuela, suggesting again the individual leading Venezuela. Some people call him the unofficial leader. Technically, he's the leader, but there's a government in exile recognized by the United States. He has ties to that cartel. And Trump says it commits brutal crimes, including murders, kidnappings, rapes, extortion, human trafficking, weapons trafficking. He said TDA has engaged in and continues to engage in mass illegal migration to the United States to further its objectives of harming United States citizens, undermining public safety, and supporting the Maduro regime, again, the Venezuelan leader's goal of destabilizing democratic nations in the Americas, including the United States. Suggesting that actually the U.S. is not the only target of this type of operation, suggesting that Venezuela is actively trying to basically subvert countries throughout the Americas, which would include Canada, Latin America. Technically, both North and South America are America, and Central America. Now he says this, TDA is closely aligned with and indeed has infiltrated the Maduro regime, including its military and law enforcement apparatus. He's suggesting effectively that the entire regime in Venezuela is being run as kind of a puppet regime of this gang. And he says, like El Asami, Nicolas Maduro, who claims to act as Venezuela's president and asserts control over the security forces and other authorities in Venezuela, also maintains close ties to regime-sponsored narco-terrorists. He was actually sanctioned as part of this before. It's Maduro leads the regime-sponsored enterprise Cartel de los Soles, which coordinates with and relies on TDA, Tren de Aragua, and other organizations to carry out its objective of using illegal narcotics as a weapon to flood the United States. In 2020, Maduro and other regime members were charged with narco-terrorism and other crimes in connection with this plot against America. Now, look, this actually is true, by the way, and the recognition of this, it's not even partisan. This is even though it's being painted very partisan right now, it's not technically partisan. During the Biden administration, the Democrats, they also had a very similar stance on Maduro. Biden took very strong actions against Nicolas Maduro. And former President Joe Biden even officially recognized the opposition leader of Venezuela, who's, again, seeking sanctuary in Spain. He is recognized as the country's official president in exile. And Biden referred to Maduro as being illegitimate and as having ties to the cartel that Trump is mentioning as well, meaning it's being painted very partisan right now. This was not technically partisan, at least the stance on Maduro. But what's important with this context is that for Donald Trump to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, this late 1700s act, shortly after the founding of the U.S., basically declaring we're under invasion, legal arguments have said that there needs to be an actual war, or you have to be under an invasion from a specific country. It's a bit of a gray area saying we're under invasion by a gang that has been designated a terrorist organization, if you want to go by the specific language of the law. But of course, the world has changed quite a bit since the late 1700s, and we now understand that we can be at war with a terrorist organization. The war on terror, the entire designation around that, has made it so that while war with an organization is also a war, not necessarily war with a country. But it seems that Trump is also expanding this to suggest that Venezuela is the country and that we're not going to war with Venezuela per se, but instead against the gangs that are puppeteering it. Now, it seems that Trump is using the terror designation of Tren de Aragua alongside the group's ties to Venezuela and the cartels there to make this designation. And we'll have to see if it holds up. Trump states in the order, quote, "I find and declare that TDA, Tren de Aragua, is perpetrating, attempting, and threatening an invasion or predatory incursion against the territory of the United States." He says TDA is undertaking hostile actions and conducting irregular warfare, unconventional war, meaning this is a war, against the territory of the United States, both directly and at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. A proxy war being fought with a gang, in other words. Now, he says, under this order, Trump says basically all individuals described are now subject to immediate apprehension, detention, and removal from the United States. And it also notes they will not be permitted residence in the United States. Now, what does that mean for illegal immigrants and, of course, the declaration of an invasion against the country? Well, based on the technical language of the order, it appears this would mainly just be targeted at gang members with Tren de Aragua. It could be used to speed up their deportations. There are thousands of them. This would not be the deportation probably of the millions we may have been expecting with the declaration of a foreign invasion. The other technicality with that is if Tren de Aragua is seen working with other gangs, which gangs tend to have a lot of cross-pollination between them, Trump may be able to use this to target other gangs across the United States. They all tend to be very deeply intertwined when it comes to the movement of drugs, the carrying out of illegal activities. Most gangs, even deeply race-based gangs, will work with other gangs, including ones that they would otherwise be opposed to. For example, even like the white nationalist gangs, like Aryan Brotherhood, they'll work with black gangs or Mexican gangs, and a lot of gangs, unfortunately, do tend to be race-based. Meaning, of course, that this will mainly target Tren de Aragua, but could actually apply to a lot of others by extension. Now, the language does not suggest this deportation order is going to apply to just your average illegal immigrant. Meaning, you're probably not going to see like the restaurant worker at the local restaurant get sent to like, El Salvador to go work in their forced labor camp or something. You probably won't see that. You're not going to see the guys picking strawberries or something shipped off to El Salvador, probably. This does seem to be directed more at what is really an unconventional war. Now, Trump also directs the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to prepare and publish a letter on this policy within the next 60 days. Now, it's going to be challenged a lot until then, but the official legal argument within 3 months. Now, this will be sent to the Chief Justice, the Chief Judge of every Circuit Court of Appeals, the Chief Judge of every district and territorial court in the country, meaning not even just states, but even, for example, like Saipan and Guam and Puerto Rico and maybe even tribal governments, and also the governor of every state and territory in the United States, as well as the top legal authorities. And basically, it seems that Trump is going through legal channels in the Justice Department to carry this out. And will then have the Department of Justice communicate this as an order to all the legal systems in the country. So right now we see the legal side of this advancing forward. Until then, it's going to be challenged. On that point, a federal judge has now blocked the order. A judge is saying that he has the authority to stop the President of the United States from declaring we're under invasion. And the judge even ordered that the deportation flights carrying the Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members, that the flights have to turn around and they have to bring these gang members back to the United States. This is the New York Post. It said a federal judge temporarily blocked President Trump on Saturday from invoking the 18th century Alien Enemies Act to swiftly deport alleged Venezuelan gang members without a hearing, ordering any flights carrying the supposed criminals to turn around, saying, yeah, you're trying to deport them, bring them right back. U.S. District Judge James Borsberg quickly ordered the Trump administration to halt all removals after the commander-in-chief signed off on a presidential action invoking the 1798 law aimed at targeting Venezuelan prison gang Tren de Aragua, the Washington Post has reported. And it's the chief judge in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. judge, said he heard that the flights are actively departing and directed U.S. officials to have planes in the air carrying migrants, illegal immigrants, returned to the United States, the outlet reported, and said, quote, any plane containing these folks that is going to take off or is in the air needs to be returned to the United States, however that is accomplished. Boasberg, the judge, reportedly wrote, saying, look, if they're on the tarmac, if they're getting ready to take off, even if they're in the air, turn those planes around, bring those gang members back, because he's saying Trump cannot send these people there. And he said, quote, make sure it's complied with immediately. And it's a temporary ruling will put a 14-day restraining order on the use of the Wartime Act, meaning Trump cannot designate the Rwanda invasion, which the Trump administration hopes to use to deport any migrants, it says, illegal aliens. It identifies as a gang member without following normal criminal and immigration channels. And it's a new hearing has been scheduled for Friday as a pause will be put in place for those deported under the Alien Enemies Act. Now, after blocking the deportations, the judge issued a second order which grants class action certification to all non-citizens who could be deported under Trump's proclamation, meaning all those gang members now have the ability to file class action certifications against the United States. And the complaint was filed with support from the ACLU and Democracy Forward. And it challenges Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act, stating, quote, it cannot be used here against nationals of a country, Venezuela, with whom the United States is not at war, which is not invading the United States, they say, That's the debatable part, and which has not launched a predatory incursion into the United States. Those last two parts are going to be the ones most debated on, right? Because remember, the Alien Enemies Act isn't just war, it's also invasion. And if Maduro has talked about sending people here, which he has, by the way, Trump can actually very easily invoke it. But again, it will be challenged. Now, on that point, as the judge gave this order, some of those individuals, these alleged gang members, were already in the air, already being sent, and already on their way out of the country when the judge blocked the order. And some are saying these flights were in violation of the order. The White House responded to that. This is the Epoch Times. It said the White House said on Sunday that deportation flights carrying Venezuelan immigrants suspected of being members of the Tren de Aragua criminal gang, a U.S. designated terrorist organization, did not conflict with a judge's order that blocked such actions because the ruling was issued after the flights had already left U.S. territory. They're saying, well, the judge only has jurisdiction within the United States. The flights at the time of the ruling were already outside the territory of the United States, meaning the judge had no power there, according to the Trump administration. And they said this, quote, the administration did not refuse to comply with the court order. That's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying in a statement. And she added, a single judge in a single city, Washington, D.C., cannot direct the movement of an aircraft full of foreign alien terrorists who were physically expelled from U.S. soil. It says Leavitt made the clarification following U.S. District Judge James Boasberg's ruling on Saturday that blocked President Donald Trump's proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Notice that Boasberg also ordered the return of deportation flights already en route to El Salvador. Meaning, of course, the gang members were sent out of the United States, but any follow-up deportations, those will be held under the judge's order, first hearing this Friday. And now look, these deported gang members have now arrived in their new home in El Salvador, and they're being imprisoned. This is the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, saying this, quote, today, the first 238 members of the Venezuelan criminal organization Tren de Aragua arrived in our country. They were immediately transferred to CECOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center, for a period of 1 year, renewable. He says the United States will pay a very low fee for them, but a high one for us, meaning it's a good deal on both sides. He says over time, these actions, combined with the production already being generated by more than 40,000 inmates engaged in various workshops and labor under the Zero Idleness program, meaning they don't just let them sit in their cells all day, they actually make them work. They do garments, they do construction, they actually get them working, and through that they actually lower the cost of imprisonment. You could call that forced labor, call it what you will. But he says it will help make our prison system self-sustainable, meaning these prisoners pay for themselves. He said as of today, it costs $200 million per year. He's suggesting that in the future it will not cost anything. But he says on this occasion, the U.S. has also sent us 23 MS-13 members, these other gangs, wanted by El Salvadorian justice, including 2 ringleaders. Remember, Bukele, this is El Salvador, MS-13 is from El Salvador. They're one of the gangs that was terrorizing the country, which Bukele, again, brought peace to by very aggressively going after them. Now he adds, quote, one of them, these MS-13 gang members, is a member of the criminal organization's highest structure. This will help us finalize intelligence gathering and go after the last remnants of MS-13, including its former and new members, money, weapons, drugs, hideouts, collaborators, and sponsors, meaning everyone connected to them in any way, even if you're collaborating with them, sponsoring them, working with them, you can be targeted as well. It says, as always, we continue advancing in the fight against organized crime, which technically when we think organized crime, we think mafia. Gangs like this are also organized criminal organizations. But he adds, quote, this time we are also helping our allies, making our prison system self-sustainable and obtaining vital intelligence to make our country an even safer place, all in a single action. And also when the judge said that you have to return these people, Bukele messaged the judge on X saying too late. Now, like in terms of the cost, $200 million, It sounds like a lot. That's actually a pretty good deal by U.S. standards. If you go by the actual cost in the U.S., it costs about $42,000 every single year for every single criminal in a U.S. prison. We pay a lot of money to house prisoners here. Now, at the state level, it's typically around like $33,000. Some states, it's exponentially higher, but those are anomalies. Typical cost at the state level is about $33,000 every year for every single prisoner. Some states pay huge amounts, but again, that's the anomaly. For El Salvador, being able to hold 40,000 inmates, which is what that facility can hold, for $200 million a year, that comes down to around $5,000 a year for each prisoner, which, if you understand, $42,000 is the normal price we'd pay. That's a big discount. That's actually a very good deal by U.S. standards. And if they're saying, again, that they can even eventually waive the fee through local work programs, well, you know, they talk about it like forced labor. We have work programs for prisoners already in the U.S. This is kind of how it already works. But basically, they could waive the fee entirely, meaning this is a very cost-effective way to house these criminals who are from other countries to begin with. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio wrote on X, quote, "We have sent 2 dangerous top MS-13 leaders plus 21 of its most wanted back to face justice in El Salvador, also as promised by President Trump. We sent over 250 alien enemy members of Tren de Aragua, which El Salvador has agreed to hold in their very good jails at a fair price that will also save our taxpayer dollars." He notes that President Bukele in El Salvador is not only the strongest security leader in our region, he's also a great friend of the U.S. Thank you. And remember that Marco Rubio had also gone to El Salvador to personally meet with Bukele as part of these deals. Now look, folks, also on this point, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, has now officially released its brand new CBP One app, now called the CBP Home app. Now, that's the app that used to be used to facilitate mass migration into the United States. They have now repurposed that to facilitate mass deportations from the United States, and in particular, self-deportations, where you can phone home using the app. Now, ICE posted about this, Immigration Enforcement. They said this, quote, "If you're ready to self-deport, submit your intent to depart on the new CBP Home mobile app." Get it today, apparently. Now, folks, look, on another topic, the astronauts who were stranded on the International Space Station, still technically there, they're now being rescued by SpaceX. Elon Musk, SpaceX, he was saying, we're going to go get them. He says the Biden administration kind of abandoned them. There's arguments about that. It's kind of true. But again, NASA didn't really have the ability to get them at the time. SpaceX, a private company that works with NASA, has now done it. The astronauts, they were only supposed to be at that space station for 8 days, and those 8 days turned into 9 months. Not the kind of thing you'd want to have happen to you. Videos were posted by NASA showing the arrival of the SpaceX capsule with 9 crew on board in the rescue mission. The return flight back to Earth is going to be later this week, but they have now arrived at the space station. Man, there's some great videos on this. They don't have sound. We can show you the B-roll of it. Now, Elon Musk, he also posted a video from the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. That's his private one. He showed it flying, docking with the space station. It's seen flying in space over the Earth, and then successfully docking with the station, which rocks as it makes contact. And again, very interesting times. This is a victory lap, basically. Now, folks, look, in other news, Kari Lake. You might remember she ran for governor of Arizona. Some note that she did very well, even though that did not reflect in the final results. But Kari Lake is now senior advisor for the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Trump appointed her to that position. This is big because this is all the different state-run media of the United States. Now, this position, it gives her oversight of American state media. That includes Radio Free Asia, Voice of America, which has now been kind of dismantled, and a lot of others. We actually have quite a few state media, Radio Free Europe and so on. Now, among her first moves was to cancel a deal for the agencies to get a new office in Washington, D.C. Watch this.
I'm sitting here on the 13th floor of a shiny, brand new, beautiful skyscraper building that is costing you, the taxpayer, a fortune. The Biden administration folks who were running this agency before, right before they left office, signed a brand new lease for this building, a 15-year lease that's going to cost the taxpayer nearly $250 million. Here's the kicker. They already have a building that they're located in that is paid off, that they could have renovated or updated, but they chose instead to get us into a lease that's costing the taxpayer a fortune. I know that every one of you out there is working hard and parting with your tax dollars. You're expecting it to be used wisely, not misused and mismanaged. And I can tell you that this building is a colossal waste of money.
Now, she notes that this new office, it's not even currently equipped to do broadcasting for TV or other media, which anyone who's worked in film knows it costs a lot of money to build a studio. Even a basic studio costs a lot of money. And so she's saying that they would have to, pay millions and millions of dollars, even more on top of the existing fees to build those capacities, which they would have to do given the fact that they're a media. And in addition to that, she also canceled contracts, and this is big because it's not even just state media, but a lot of, say, corporate media or legacy media. She canceled a lot of contracts they had with various news outlets they get content from, other news agencies. That includes AP, Reuters, and actually quite a long list of others. Some of those programs were allegedly paying these outlets millions of dollars, tens of millions. Now, she wrote this in X. She said, quote, "I moved today to cancel expensive and unnecessary newswire contracts for U.S. Agency for Global Media, including tens of millions of dollars in contracts with the Associated Press, Reuters, and Agence France Presse. U.S. AGM is an American taxpayer-funded news organization with an 83-year history. We should not be paying outside news companies to tell us what the news is with nearly $1 billion budget. We should be producing news ourselves. And if that's not possible, the American taxpayer should demand to know why." Basically, she's saying with a budget like this, we shouldn't be needing to buy content from other people. Not to mention the fact that these media are supposed to be the actual voice of America. Technically, it's supposed to be American propaganda. And many people note that it does not read like American propaganda. Oftentimes it reads like anti-American propaganda. America does propaganda worse than anyone. We literally do propaganda and we criticize ourselves. But anyways, look, she notes that canceling these contracts will save taxpayers around $53 million every single year. The contracts of money that was going to other news outlets, funding some of the corporate media. And that's also a lot less money going to other news outlets, right? Not even just taxpayer money, but money that was being used to prop up and fund other media. Now, in another post, Kari Lake said that she identified other issues. These include massive national security violations. She alleged that there are spies, terrorist sympathizers, terrorist supporters who have infiltrated the agency, U.S. AGM, meaning that we had actual spies helping in some capacity within these agencies. And I can tell you, because I'm around like the Chinese diaspora, I know a lot of people who escaped, communist China and other totalitarian regimes. They've noted when they read some of these news outlets, it reads like CCP propaganda. These agencies sometimes hire nationals in the country they're trying to write about. For example, if they want to report on China, they hire someone in China who's Chinese, who under Chinese law could not say anything against the Chinese Communist Party, meaning we're basically paying people to run CCP propaganda. That's the big allegation. Now, some say, well, you can't go that far. Other people would point out that these agencies have not really taken strong stances in the interests of the United States when it comes to like human rights abuses and things like that, because they want to have access to those countries. And by extension of that, they hire individuals who will be controlled by the countries they're in, because they can't, they'd go to prison if they didn't. That's just the way it is. Now, she also said hundreds of millions of dollars was also identified that was being spent on other news outlets. We talked about the 50-something million dollars just going to, content for, buying content. She said that we were spending hundreds of millions on other media, right? Left-wing media. She said these are the fake news media. And she said these news outlets often just parrot talking points of America's adversaries, meaning we were not funding media in America's interest. We were funding media that just say things against our country or say things in the interest of the regimes we're trying to talk to, the people there. Now, if you remember what Radio Free Asia used to represent, what Radio Free Europe used to represent, what America's Voice used to represent, if you lived under the communist bloc, if you were under the Soviet Union, this was your fresh water. This was your fresh air. You would go to jail if the secret police, if the Stasi found that radio and you were listening to news from the United States, because that was your lifeline. It had all the news that you could not get in your country. It told you the truth from beyond the wall, and people loved it for that. And yes, it was illegal in those countries because it told the truth. That is what this used to represent. And for anybody who loved freedom in those countries, it was something that they deeply appreciated. The argument now is that rather than being basically the illegal broadcast in these countries because it says things the regimes do not want their people to hear, they've instead made deals where they're able to operate in the countries legally, and because of that, they cannot say things the regimes do not want people to hear. That is the difference in terms of how they've changed. Now, Trump also took actions to significantly reduce the size of these government media agencies, along with actually several other agencies. He kind of dismantled several agencies just in an order. The changes, these basically reduce them to minimum levels they need to continue to function. He didn't technically get rid of them, which is the way some media framed it. He just made them down to like bare bones operations. This is the White House order on it. Trump said, quote, "This order continues the reduction in the elements of the federal bureaucracy that the President has determined are unnecessary, except as provided in subsection B of this section. The non-statutory components and functions of the following governmental entities shall be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law, and such entities shall reduce the performance of their statutory functions and associated personnel to the minimum presence and function required by law," meaning the very baseline of what the law requires them to do, that is what they're going to be. Nothing beyond it, right? If the law dictates they have to have like 100 people and they have 1 million people, they're going to go down to 100 people. They don't have 1 million, by the way, but I'm just giving you an example. And this applies to several organizations. This includes the Federal Mediation and Consultation Service, the United States Agency for Global Media, the one we've been discussing, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in the Smithsonian Institution, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, which they allege is not really reduced homelessness, the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, and the Minority Business Development Agency. All of these now, again, some media framed it that Trump just did away with them. It's not true. He's brought them down to the base of what is legally required they operate at. He cut off everything not legally dictated, in other words. Now look, folks, on a different topic, the government shutdown has been averted yet again. It looked like the government was going to shut down like it looks like every couple months, but it did not happen like it does every couple months. And look, this was kind of extra controversial this time because the government shutdown was on the spending bill that Trump had been pushing Republicans in Congress to pass. And it got passed because some Democrats sided with Republicans, and that includes Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Schumer issued the call for Democrats to pass the spending bill. Some of them are very unhappy about that, but his argument was that not passing the bill and allowing the government to shut down, which if you let the government shut down, it basically only maintains essential workers, meaning everything not essential to the functioning of the government goes away temporarily. They don't get fired, but it just goes on pause. He suggested that situation would actually benefit Trump because many people suggest that's kind of what Trump wants in the first place. The bare minimum presence of the government. It basically would have created the government Trump kind of seems to be moving towards. And so Schumer voted to pass a spending bill. That spending bill gives the money to the Trump administration to carry out the mass deportations they want to carry out. It basically funds all the things they need to carry out the mass deportations, which we have not yet seen really take form. Now, Schumer voted to pass this bill, and this decision, it's now causing rifts among the Democrats. Very deep rifts, in fact. Some are pushing to even remove Schumer as the Democrat minority leader. Town Hall said this: will the Senate have enough votes to invoke cloture on the House's 6-month continuing resolution? It got the stamp of approval from Senate Democratic leadership as Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, caved. The New York liberal sunk the first cloture vote, doing a mini victory lap before the lack of a message, plan, and fear that blowback would damage his party forced him to walk back the Schumer shutdown. It was evident yesterday during a Senate Democratic Party lunch that the dam had broken. It says House Democrats are reportedly livid at Schumer. They're unhappy with him, who is in a no-win situation. The party grassroots are going to roast him for backing the CR, the spending bill that benefited Donald Trump, the one that Trump needed to carry out his agenda. It says Democrats writ large would have thrown the kitchen sink at him for allowing millions of government workers to get furloughed for no reason, meaning had Schumer voted and blocked this and shut down the government, they probably would have attacked him as well. And they're saying that he kind of was between a rock and a hard place. He was going to get attacked no matter what. There was no way out of it. They note the CR, the spending bill, is as clean as you can get, which Democrats usually like. And it notes that Representatives Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York as well, and Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California, are now in open revolt, urging Democrats to sink the 6-month CR for the 30-day alternative. It says the wounds of Schumer's defection were raw yesterday, which hints at civil war brewing. It notes that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, will likely cite this spending bill fight as the reason behind a potential primary challenge of Schumer. Remember, AOC is very big on protecting the illegal immigrants from deportation. The spending bill basically funds the mass deportation. And there have been a lot of rifts forming among Democrats, polling that suggests they're at actual historic low approval ratings. CNN had some polls on this. And also individual ratings showing that AOC is maybe the most popular among them, but she only has about 10% support generally, meaning they're in a very rough state right now. And there's a lot of infighting now brewing. AOC is also going against Fetterman and also within the party. And it's unclear what the future of the party is going to be now, especially if they oust Schumer, because they'd have to have a new minority leader. Now look, on Schumer's part, I personally say he was right in that when he said that a government shutdown probably would have benefited Trump. Now you could argue both ways, right? On one side, passing the bill, this CR, the spending bill, it gave Trump what he wanted, at least on the surface, right? Trump needs that money to enact his agendas. The mass deportations now have the money to be carried out. Yes, he passed that. On the other side, had he not passed the bill, had he let the government shut down, that would have been on the shoulders of the Democratic Party because it would have been the Democrats that voted to shut down the government. And that would have given Trump a lot of additional powers. This was not something that was clearly discussed. On one side, if you have a government shutdown, it stalls a lot of things, it slows things down. It goes back to just the essential, basic services of the government. Everything else is on hold, and a lot of different things that could challenge the president also go on hold. Now, Trump would have been operating in a domain of chaos, and he would have probably thrived in it because, look, a lot of people did not talk about this, but when there's a government shutdown, the president actually gets a few additional powers. Had this happened, this would have opened the doors for Trump to appoint acting officials to all the vacant positions in the government. And remember that they're kind of slow walking a lot of Trump's appointees right now. They've sort of been given that, some of his appointees are still being confirmed by the Senate, and basically the way it would work, the argument from Trump could be that, hey, a government shutdown has disrupted Congress. If there's a disruption in the functions of Congress, which if you have a government shutdown, it is the case, right? They're in disruption. They couldn't agree on a spending bill. They shut down the government. Trump could declare a recess. He actually would have those powers. And if he did that, it would open the door for him to create temporary appointments for about a year roughly. And a shutdown would have also let Trump declare emergencies, a lot of emergencies. He could basically put Congress on leave, appoint whoever he wants for 1 year, and then declare national emergencies, which you could argue there would be because some functions of the government would be on hold. If, for example, all the non-essential branches of the government were on hold, what does that mean? Well, Trump may say we need to have things doing this, but the current ones, I don't want them. We are declared an emergency, so what do? Trump could actually redirect funding, already appointed to certain operations, redirect that, and then be able to do basically whatever he wants. That would have big implications, given that he's already cutting massive amounts of government spending. This would have handed him everything he wanted on a silver platter. It would have been the greatest godsend Trump could have ever asked for had the Democrats voted to shut down the government. Look, the ability to just redirect that spending, that alone would go a very long way. And on top of all of that, Trump's actions, it could have been heavily focused on reducing government spending, reducing bureaucracy, reducing the size of the government, as we're watching right now. This is what he's doing as we speak. So what would a government shutdown look like? Well, basically, a government shutdown would look like what some suggest Trump is trying to accomplish. Basically, it would mean that the only, essential government operations would continue. That'd be things like the military, air traffic control, law enforcement, the basic functions of government. It would also give Trump a lot of negotiating power. This is where we get really big when it comes to budgets. Because if Democrats and conservatives all voted to pass something in the House and Senate, and then it goes to the desk of the president, hey, we need to get the government back up and running again, Trump could refuse to sign the budget. He could refuse to sign the spending bill. He could maintain the government shutdown, right? Because if you want to have a spending bill passed, it has to go through both chambers of Congress, again, House and Senate, and then signed by the president. The last stop on that is the desk of Donald Trump. And so if they wanted to restart the government, and Trump was basically general chaos, doing whatever he wanted during that time, appointing his own interim, leaders of different agencies, redirecting funds, declaring emergencies, putting Congress on recess, which he could have done, he's doing everything he wants. He could say, I'm not going to restart the government until you sign into law everything I want. He could have done that using basically the Democrat shutdown of the government, which has now been averted. He could have used that to say, you're the ones who shut it down. I'm not going to restart it unless you work with me. That is what was avoided by the Democrats. Now, if Democrats also caused that shutdown, remember, in terms of policy right now, a lot of their focus is on protecting government agencies. A lot of their focus is not in line with what the average, boots on the ground voter may be interested in. For example, some Democrats are very much trying to block mass deportations. If you look at polling, actually a lot of them support it, so it's a bit mixed, which is why I think you're seeing rifts on the polling among Democrats. But if they shut down the government, a lot of the public blame would be on them for doing it. Letting Trump do this, even if Trump were to draw it out by just refusing to sign a new bill, Democrats would be forced to do something they would very much not want to do, because Trump would have leverage, which he's very good at doing, because that's how he does his business deals. Schumer avoided that situation. Chuck Schumer avoided that for the Democrats. And again, you can decide which side you agree with on it. I do think that just passing the bill to get Trump money to deport people, probably a lot less damaging to the interests of the Democrats than what could have happened with a government shutdown. Now, folks, in other news, with Donald Trump's tariffs now going into effect and with the global trade wars now starting, there's a lot of them, a big question is, what impact is all of this going to have on the cost of goods in the United States? If I go to the store, does it cost me more money to buy a carton of eggs than if there were no tariffs, right? If I want to buy a TV or a new computer, does it cost me more money or does it cost less? The actual interests of the average American who may not even care about politics, which I don't know if there's many these days. But a bigger question might be this. What does this mean for the US dollar? I'll be talking more about this after going back from a quick break, so stay tuned.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Folks, is there a plan to devalue the US dollar? Let's talk about it. With Trump's tariffs now going into effect and the global trade war starting, a big question is going to be the impact on the basic cost of goods. What does it cost me to buy things? Will there be trickle-down costs? But what is not being discussed as much is what does this actually mean for the US dollar? Because when it comes to tariffs, one effect they have is it devalues your currency. There's a very real possibility that tariffs could cause a devaluing of the US dollar. And there are actually some arguments saying that maybe Trump is doing this intentionally. Maybe that's what he wants. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. It has happened historically. Let me show you what happened in the past. This is the Telegraph. They say there's nothing new under the sun, so it won't surprise you to know we've been here before. Rewind to the mid-1980s. When Ronald Reagan was the US president, and America was cursed by a similarly large trade deficit, which is the big issue we face with most countries on the face of the planet. And it notes, thanks to the administration's expansionary fiscal policies, a relatively strong currency buoyed by high interest rates, under threat of tariffs, the US's 4 largest trading partners at the time, Japan, Germany, France, and the UK, were persuaded to intervene in currency markets to weaken the dollar, a plan that actually worked. An agreement that became known as the Plaza Accord. It worked from peak to trough. The dollar lost about 40% of its trade-weighted value. That success has galvanized calls from some in the Trump administration for a sequel, already dubbed for obvious reasons, the Mar-a-Lago Accord. Meaning there are some people actually pushing for this. There is an argument for devaluing the dollar. You know, other countries, they're accused of doing this. They would call it currency manipulation. The Chinese Communist Party very often devalues the yuan. What is the effect of that? It's very cheap to manufacture in China. At least it used to be. They've kind of gone off the deep end, and it's no longer that much cheaper to do business in China. But that was the argument before, right? Other countries can't compete with it because it's so cheap to do business there. Cheap Chinese labor, because they were devaluing their currency for a long time. Japan recently did this. Japan devalued its currency. In fact, that's one of the reasons some people say one of the factors that caused a lot of the global trade turmoil. This is not discussed that much, but that was one of the factors. Other countries manipulate their currencies. Other countries do this in order to lower the cost of living. Other countries do this to try to lure in foreign business. Because why would you go to one country where it costs, let's say, adjusted for currency, 3 times as much to manufacture over another country? You could say it costs $15 an hour here, or 15, whatever the currency is here, but because of the difference in the actual value of the currency, it's like 3 times as much to manufacture in the US. Why would you do it? Because when you go to market, it means you have to charge 3 times as much for the end product. People don't want to work there. And so what do? You devalue your currency, you make it so that you can have better competition, and then people bring their businesses to your country because they can technically get more road for wear, right? They can go a lot further with the same amount of money. Now, should the United States do this? That's a big debate. It could help the United States avoid an economic recession. It actually could. It would also make costs of manufacturing a lot more competitive in the United States. And that's what Trump's talking about, right? Trump's trying to bring back all those businesses. He's saying if you don't want to get tariffs, you got to bring your companies back to this country. He's trying to bring back all the businesses that left under NAFTA to Mexico and Canada. He's trying to bring back all those factories and foreign investment from China back to the United States. He's trying to just slap around Europe a bit. He's trying to bring back all of this to America. The problem is, well, the US dollar trades very high when compared to other currencies. Manufacturing here is not really fiscally that good, other than maybe avoiding tariffs, but they're saying that the inflated price, this is where it gets big. The value of the dollar, because other countries are hurting economically, if you look at Canada right now, I believe the last number was like 1.5 to the dollar. And if you understand there's that extra 50 cents essentially on top of everything per dollar, it kind of offsets the tariffs. It makes the tariff war kind of useless. That's the argument, right? They could say, yeah, we could manufacture in the United States and not pay tariffs, right? Hey, not pay tariffs, but it costs X amount more to manufacture in the United States because of the value of the dollar. And so we're actually better off keeping our businesses here. That's the argument, right? And so if Trump were to compete with the cost of manufacturing, if you were to have it so that the tariffs don't really get nullified by the inflated value of the dollar, he has to devalue the dollar. That's the argument. But look, devaluing the dollar has other impacts. The US dollar is the world reserve currency. If you take it and devalue it, that means everybody who's put their assets into the US dollar, which a lot of countries do actually, it means that they lose value. It means that you've harmed their financial interests. Some say do it because countries buying up US debt. Well, that's part of the reason why we're in such deep debt right now. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. The challenge on that will also be this. Other countries are trying to undermine the US dollar. They're trying to set up other reserve currencies or multiple competing ones. The BRICS currency, for example. Trump has said you cross that Rubicon, you cross that line, we're going to hit you with 100% tariffs. We're going to destroy your economy. That's what Trump is saying. And so countries may be dissuaded from trying to compete with the US dollar as reserve currencies, but it's going to be very complicated if he's devaluing the dollar because it's going to be messy, folks. Get ready for it. That said, hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's jump into some questions. I went a bit longer today, but let's talk more. All right, Gina Mikulik, you're saying the news break on local radio stations here out in Chicago make it sound like we just deported regular people, regular gang members. But yeah, you said they never mentioned they were hardcore gang members. Yeah, I've been really, I shouldn't be shocked, but I've been really shocked by the way that a lot of media cover the news these days. Now look, on the point of Trump deporting these Tren de Aragua gang members, the MS-13 ones, they're kind of avoiding the court system to an extent, which is the argument from the judge. He said you can't deport people without due process. Trump on his side is saying, well, look, we have due process, just not to the extent you want. We can, they're operating basically on existing government intelligence because they've designated MS-13 and Tren de Aragua as terrorist organizations. and they're treating them like terrorists. In the past, if they wanted to send people to Guantanamo Bay, they also didn't go through the normal court process. There were alternate methods for it. Trump is going through a different system of kind of systems for this. But they had a lot of existing intelligence on identifying who these gang members were. They're using that to carry out these deportations, and they're targeting these gang members. Now, the judge who blocked this and said, bring those gang members back, the other side of that is he's saying, bring them back and put them through the American court system. That's what he's actually saying. And so that's kind of where the discrepancy is. Depending on which branch of media you read, you're going to get a very different take on it. If you read a lot of conservative media, they're not going to tell you the deeper context of the court system and so on. If you read a lot of the liberal media, they're probably not going to tell you these were actual gang members. And not even that, but people designated as terrorists. There's a little bit of gray area here, but that's where it is. Also, the point I mentioned also, that the legal argument from the Trump side is that he's not defying the judge. At the time the order was made, it was already outside the jurisdiction of the judge. The planes were already outside the territory of the United States. And so, you know, police, for example, have jurisdiction. Certain police, depending on which branch they're in, they may not have jurisdiction outside the lines of their state. Same thing with a judge. He can't make a ruling on like international waters or something like that. You know, there might be some technicalities to it, but for the most part. And so that's the legal argument for it. On that point, the next hearing is going to be this Friday. The Trump administration has already put their case forward on it. We'll probably see this move up to the next level of the courts. And like all these things, it's going to go back and forth. And you're going to be hearing the this whole ping pong battle of news headlines. Trump was right. Judge rules that Trump was right. Then you're going to hear the other side. Judge blocks Trump again, because it's going to go through the appeals courts, right? This will go to the Supreme Court. I've mentioned before, I tend to not talk about the whole ping pong battle with y'all because I could do it every day and I can make it sound like the biggest thing on earth. The reality is it's going to get bounced back and forth. There are going to be judges who block the judges, and then judges who overturn the blocking of the judges, and so on, until it goes to the Supreme Court. I'll give you major updates on that, but I won't give you like constant stuff like that, because I don't think it's good for media to report it, but I think in terms of framing it properly, it's just going to be ongoing. I could give you stories like this multiple times a day because there's a lot of challenges right now. And I think it kind of gives a bit of false understanding of where things are at, because things get approved and then overturned and then approved again and then overturned a lot. I'll tell you when there's a major update, but other than that, I won't bother with it. Denise B., you're saying, the U.S. will pay El Salvador $6 million to detain up to 300 terrorists for 1 year. So if I did my math correctly, that's $20,000 per thug each year. I wonder if that compares to their 4-star hotel bills they were paying last year. Yeah, so the money's, there's a bit of discrepancy with the money. He's talking about $6 million to detain up to 300 terrorists. The price for the entire, so again, they've deported over 200 of them now, up to maybe 300 soon. He's saying the cost for those is going to be about $6 million. The actual facility I mentioned holds about 40,000, I believe the number was. The full cost of the whole facility is going to be about $200 million, which goes down to about $5,000 each. Current costs, as you can see, are about $20,000 each. We'd assume that the price per individual will be lowered as more people are sent to that prison. And you can understand it that there's the cost of the facility, right? There's the cost of the facility. There's the cost of the guards, the cost of operations. Price will go down as they put more people there. They'll try to offset that or even replace those costs using labor programs. And there were some interesting videos in this El Salvadorian labor programs for prisoners. They make them make garments, they make uniforms for the military, they do construction jobs, they build buildings, build houses. It's an interesting thing. I can tell you, I've shown you all videos of what life is like in those prisons otherwise. Basically, you have very bored prisoners sitting in a cell with absolutely nothing to do. Like, no TV, no nothing, kind of staring at a gray cement wall for like, I don't know, 12 hours a day, and then getting like a 20-minute sermon if they want to do it. Like, you don't really have much of a life there. Even to just touch some grass and look at the sky. If I was in that situation, I wouldn't mind building a house or two. You know what I mean? And so you could argue on the humaneness of it, but the labor programs are like that. And keep in mind, we actually do have prison labor programs in the United States as well. They do pay them a bit, right? Not a lot of money, but they do pay them a bit. But yeah, Denise B is noting, yeah, I wonder how that money compares to the money that was already being spent to house illegal immigrants. Well, on that point, the Trump administration recently blocked FEMA from sending over $50 million to New York City to pay for illegal immigrants to be housed at the, 4 or 5-star Roosevelt Hotel. If you understand that the cost for, like, I don't even know if it was a year or how long, but they were going to pay over $50 million to house people at a little hotel in New York City, and that's one of many. It's not even a big hotel, right? It doesn't hold 300 people, I'll tell you that right now. They were going to pay that much money. They stopped the money going to the hotel, and New York sued the government because they want that plus, $50+ million. Later estimates put it even higher than that. So if they were paying over $50 million to house people, and now it costs just $6 million to house 300 people in an El Salvadorian prison, which is a better deal for the United States? If you look at this just on a fiscal level, I'd say El Salvador is a much better option. Ashley from California. And also real brief on that. Keep in mind, too, that money going from the federal government to New York, this works like a subsidy. Because what happens? The money, $50+ million, I believe some put it like 80 million, just for these little operations. What does the money go to? It goes to the hotel. It goes to the hotel workers. It goes to food accommodations. It goes to other services. Every single piece of that gets taxed, meaning the hotel worker who gets paid through this has to pay taxes. The hotel has to pay taxes. Where does that money go? The money goes to New York City because they charge the taxes on it, state taxes as well as federal taxes. Again, you could argue they may not tax the full 50 million or 80 million, but when it goes out in payments for services, all of it gets taxed. And so this works like, basically a big subsidy for New York City. It gives federal money to the city through alternative means. And the individuals at these places getting government money, well, what do? They also have to buy things. They have to get clothes, they have to get food, they have to go to school, right, if they're kids, meaning that's a lot of money. New York City makes money on this. And I would call that a subsidy through other means. A lot of people made money off this. By the way, that hotel is under criminal investigation. The Department of Justice is currently investigating the Roosevelt Hotel and the way the money was being used for criminal violations, which is going to be interesting, by the way. Sorry, next question. Ashley from California, you're saying, Joe Rogan has a great question. Why is it okay for China to want to stay ethnically Chinese, but it's not okay for Poland or other nations? Right, so there's a few arguments on that. China actually does have work migrant programs. A lot of it comes from Africa. So you could argue that they bring in like black Africans, which they do. They do not bring them in to the extent that Western Europe or the United States or other countries do, by no means. And no, look, if you're from like an African country, if you're an American and you go to China, you can be there 100 years and they will never call you Chinese. Never. Never, ever, ever. If you say that, they might murder you or attack you. They will be very unhappy if you say it. You will never be Chinese if you're from another country and you go to China. Even American-born Chinese, second generation, third generation, they will never consider you Chinese fully. They'll always regard you as an American. They will call you a banana, which is yellow on the outside, white on the inside. Right? They'll call you a banana. They will never regard you as being somebody who fully conforms to their culture. They will call you that. Because, again, most countries used to be like that. Yes, the CCP is communist, which adds another layer of problematic issues to it. But, you know, you could never go to Japan for 100 years and call yourself Japanese. They might have beheaded you in the past if you tried that. You could never go to French and call yourself a French person if you were not an actual French person, if your ancestors did not come there. That's since changed because of mass migration. If you're an American and you can trace your ancestry back to the UK or Germany, and you tell a British person that you're British or a German person you're German, they'll be offended and they'll laugh at you because they will never consider you as being German or British. This is the way that identity usually works. America is an exception to this because, ironically, we're the least race-based country on Earth. You know, you can come from anywhere on Earth and call yourself an American if you align with our values. America is an anomaly like that. Most countries, nationality and ethnicity are very closely tied. I would say this has only recently changed in Europe because of the mass migration policies, but I would also argue that it's actually more contentious in those countries than it even is in the United States, because we're kind of going back pretty far. America was always kind of multinational. You know, we had Spaniards and British and French and Native Americans and, you know, of course, Black Americans pretty much since the founding of this country, in fact, long prior to the founding of this country. You had different religions, different ethnic groups. You actually had a lot of interracial relationships, even going back to the very early colonies. And, you know, it's not really talked about. You'll be hard-pressed to find an American who's been in this country for, you know, their family for generations, who is not mixed race, like myself, for example. You know what I mean? You'll be hard-pressed. At the very least, they will be a mix of white ethnic groups, which you don't find in most parts of the world, at least not until recent generations. And so because of that, you know, America has a very different view of race and ethnicity and nationality. You can be an American and be of mixed nationality. You can be an American and be a second-generation immigrant. You can be an American and be a first-generation immigrant, and America will recognize you as such, and most people will accept you. We're unique in that regard, which is also why I think it's so ridiculous, so absolutely ridiculous, that people try to say America is racist. We're probably the least racist country on the face of the planet. The difference is racism is normalized in most other countries. So normalized that they don't see it as being odd. Look, again, the American melting pot is a real thing. The other argument with that is, I think, forced acceptance of other people's cultures or viewpoints. I disagree with it fully. I think you can't force a person to negate their culture or national views for the sake of another one. I don't think you should force your culture on another person. And I think that's where, when people talk about this, that's where the real argument comes into play, because you do deal with like cultural replacement. If America wants to deport 300 gang members with Tren de Aragua because they want to bring the gang culture of Venezuela to the United States, deport all of them. Great, get rid of them. If you import tens of millions of people who have no interest in adopting American culture, who want to come here and hold their own culture and replace the culture of the United States because the number of them coming is so massive, I would deem that a threat to the nationality of the United States, to the very cultural foundation of the country. If you do it on such a scale that you risk altering the values of a nation, that crosses a line, because what you're talking about is the destruction of a nationality. And I would regard Americans as a nationality. In fact, I think we should start calling ourselves that because most other countries do. Again, go to Europe and say that you're British or German or whatever. They'll laugh in your face and they'll say, that's very funny, American, because they regard you as an American. If you go to any country on earth and tell them, my ancestors came from here, they'll be like, you're an American. You are an American. Americans are the only people who do not seem to regard themselves as Americans because we view ourselves as the cultural lineage of where we come from. We're Americans, folks. And I think it's about time we started regarding ourselves as Americans and viewing that as a unifying label for us. I love being an American. I appreciate other cultures. I like them, but I love being an American. You know what I mean? And I would hope that comes back. All right, James George, you're saying almost all nations devalue their currency via the U.S. dollar, making their exports to the U.S. more lucrative. Yeah, this is the other side of it. And this is also what Trump is getting at. Look, Canada is saying, how can America be so mean? Why are these evil Americans putting tariffs on our goods? And Trump is saying, well, why did you put tariffs on our goods? Why did you take actions to remove all of our factories and take them for your economy? Why did you do to us what we are now doing back to you? When he talks to Europe and they say, how could evil America do such vicious things? Trump is saying, well, how could you have done the same thing to us? How was it that you put tariffs on American cars? How is it that you restricted most American goods? How is it that our banks can't fully operate in your countries? How is it that our businesses cannot go to your country and operate with the same openness that we allow for yours here? How was it that for so long you were devaluing your currency, not paying your defense bills, making us pay it? When we asked you to pay it, you said, we can't do it. And then use the money you would have spent on it for all kinds of crazy woke programs that are insane or crazy far left. You have money for that, but you don't have money to balance your trade deals with us? How is that even possible? And so people are saying, how can America bully us like this? The other argument is Trump is talking about reciprocity. He wants to have reciprocal tariffs, meaning we're just balancing things. We're not overstepping that, is what he's saying. We are bringing things to the level at which they've been doing it to us. Meaning, if it's reciprocal, it just means we're not letting ourselves being taken advantage of anymore. We're not taking extra. We're just saying, stop ripping us off. And yeah, as James George notes, yeah, they devalue their currencies as well. They do it a lot. Not all of them. You know, some countries, of course, their currency is worth more than us. Like the UK, I went on vacation there one time. It's like it costs a lot of money to do anything there because of the value of their currency. But a lot of countries do. And so, on that point, they're crying foul on it. But if it's reciprocal, it means they were already doing it to us. So why was that not of equal wrongdoing, right? We're not taking advantage of them. We're just balancing it out, which is the argument from the U.S. side. And which also means we have a lot of negotiating power because they don't have a lot of ground to negotiate on. If their entire negotiating power was that we were operating at a loss, there's not much they can do to us. What are they going to do? Make us operate at more of a loss? It doesn't work that way. But the other wild card here is that some of them might run to China. But the wild card there is the Chinese economy is kind of failing right now. So they don't have the financial power they would like the world to believe they do anymore. Things are not as clear cut as people may believe. I said, folks, happy Monday. Join me tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, happy St. Patrick's Day. Let's not forget. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. That said, join me tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please share this episode. Help us get the word out. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.